In the beginning, there was absolute peace in the memeverse. After Shrek and his Infinity Gauntlet was dispatched of, it seemed like there was perfect peace. We had two major clans form after the Shrek incident, the Ohio clan and the Giga clan. These two clans lived in absolute harmony until the emergence of a new meme, the spinning skull. Rumor has it that the spinning skull gives the user its ability to speedrun anything, and this spinning skull would cause a massive argument. Subscribe if you haven't already, the lore gets crazy. The Ohio clan would suggest that they claim the spinning skull and lock it down in Ohio. That way, powerful villains like Shrek could never get their hands on strong items ever again. This is because Shrek had access to the indefinite glove, which he used to almost wipe the universe. Luckily, he was only able to reset the power levels before he was stopped. However, the Giga clan had other ideas. They suggested that the spinning skull be weaponized to stop another force from Shrek arising again. And because of this, it originated in a civil war. Now we had two leaders of these clans. The leader of the Ohio clan was the famous Ohio final boss, and the leader of the Giga clan was the famous Giga Chad. These two memes were at the time the absolute strongest in the verse. However, this war would start something different. Let's go ahead and look at Giga Chad's side. Giga Chad comes with his Giga Chad army. Essentially, the Giga Chad army is a bunch of Sigma Force users. Now, if you don't know what the Sigma Force is, it's actually the force that the strongest Sigma characters tap into. Think of it like the Speed Force in DC. Users of the Sigma Force can activate Mogging and Sigma powers to be able to combat their opponent. Now, the Giga Chad army are people who have access to Giga Chad's facial structure, and by doing the Giga Chad face, it boosts their power level tenfold. But to be able to face off against the Ohio clan, Giga Chad knew that he needed more troops. Because of this, he would embark on a mission to Mogwart. Now, if you don't know what Mogwart is, it's the top university for all people attempting to become Moggers. This is where people go to increase their aura and aesthetics to become a Mogger. Now, let's take a look into Mogwarts. Mogwarts would teach a bunch of looks maxing, and by doing looks maxing, these users would attempt to increase their power levels in the verse. Now, there are a lot of well-known professors in Mogwarts like K. Shami and others, but essentially these students would study every single day, mewing intensely to increase their jawline. But also, Mogwarts were very strongly aligned with Giga Chad ideology, and because of this, Giga Chad would approach them. He'd approach Principal K. Shami and put forward the idea for a war. See, they had found out something that the Ohioans didn't want them to know, because the spinning skull was actually already in Ohio. Giga Chad assembled the leaders of Mogwarts University for a table meeting. He'd say that they would need to full push Ohio to be able to claim the spinning skull. And after a long debate, they decided they need to take down the Ohioans. Now, to increase the strength of the Giga clan, he wouldn't just go to Mogwarts University. He'd also employ someone who was very powerful in the verse at the time. Back in 2022, one of the strongest characters to ever exist was the cameraman, and Giga Chad knew that he could get the cameraman on his side because he knew the power level of the Ohio clan. After leaving and conferring with the cameraman, he was able to get him on his side, leaving Giga Chad with him, the cameraman, Moggers, and the Giga Chad army. Now let's take a look at the Ohio clan. As we know, the leader is the infamous Ohio final boss. With access to almost every anime power, the Hoover of Ohio, the Dragon of Ohio, and pretty much all buffs you can think of, he at the time was arguably the strongest character in the verse, depending on who you are. Now, the Ohio final boss would also have his own team. His team consisted of characters that weren't too weakened by the memeverse reset. What is meant by this is that he chose people that were adequately able to defend Ohio. As a result of this, we have the Ohio final boss and Quandale Dingle. Now, if you don't know, Quandale Dingle is also very powerful, as he also commands the army of the Capybara, and when the Capybara pull up, they're dangerous. Quandale Dingle at the time was also close, or if not at the peak of his powers, meaning that we had peak of his powers Ohio final boss and peak of his powers Quandale Dingle. He also had access to the Ohioan, and they locked down the spinning skull deep in Ohio. They would then hear about Giga Chad's plan to invade Ohio. As a result of this, they'd begin to fortify. Now, Giga Chad would send out one of the strongest clans of the Mogwarts University, the Unknown Slayers. He sent the Unknown Slayers to investigate Ohio to find out where the spinning skull is, and after not too long, they would locate that it was in Ohio, bringing back the exact location to Giga Chad. This would all set up for the ultimate ultimate war in the memeverse, a civil war between two juggernauts, the Ohio Final Boss and Giga Chad. And after both sides would train extremely hard, the battle would begin shortly after. As everyone rushed in, they separated to fight the other stronger characters. We'd get Quandale Dingle versus the cameraman. In this epic battle, Quandale Dingle and the cameraman would go crazy. The cameraman would use his insane levels of speed to face off against Quandale Dingle, but Quandale Dingle would use his powers to stand up to him. The fight would be strong and arduous, but the winner would be the cameraman. Then the Ohioans would face off against the Giga Chad army, and it was a tie. Now Quandale Dingle would severely weaken the cameraman and destroy their environments, as they would throw each other around during the fight, but the cameraman would come out on top, high difficulty. As a result of this, we get the Ohio Final Boss, strongest in the verse, versus Giga Chad, Mogwarts, and the Giga army. The battle would be epic, with the Ohio Final Boss floating mid-air, preparing to face off against the Giga Chad army. As the Giga Chad army would rush him, he'd handle each and every one of them. In quick combat, he'd take them down in a couple blows. The Dragon of Ohio would slice through his opponent. On top of that, the Moggers from Mogwarts would also attempt to jump the Ohio Final Boss. For this, he'd use the Hoover of Ohio to dispatch of them, then activate his multiple Bankais to come out on top. On top of that, he'd also activate his domain expansion, Nature Za Oria, putting everybody in a beautiful meadow that puts them to sleep. Now the Ohio Final Boss would take considerable damage from the battle and be left to face off against Giga Chad. They both activate their strongest form, the final boss of Ohio, and Boundless and Mega Chad Giga Chad. Facing off, Giga Chad would throw universes at the Ohio Final Boss. The Ohio Final Boss would have to activate his second domain expansion, and they would go toe to toe with what felt like eternity. Blow for blow, it was hard to see who would win. The Ohio Final Boss would put up an extremely good fight, but Giga Chad would get some strong blows in. And Giga Chad, after doing enough damage to the Ohio Final Boss, would rush in for the spinning skull. Cruising through Ohio, he'd get through the guards, and finally lay eyes upon the ultimate power in the memeverse, the spinning skull. Laying eyes on it, the rumors were true. It was able to absolutely speedrun anything. But just before he could grab it, the Ohio Final Boss would stand in his way. Using his flash step ability, he'd cut him off, and they would duke it out one last time. Two friends turned foes in an epic battle to determine who stood at the top of the memeverse. This hand-to-hand combat would be ridiculous, moving so quickly that the cameraman could barely see what was going on. But the Ohio Final Boss would fall down, as Giga Chad hadn't taken as much damage as before, and slipping past the Ohio Final Boss's defenses, Giga Chad would claim the spinning skull, and using its power, he'd be able to speedrun out of Ohio. Having lost the battle, the Ohio Final Boss felt defeated, and would go into a massive training arc to try to get his valor back. Giga Chad would take the spinning skull and return to Mogwarts, becoming the principal, but also one of the most undisputed characters in the memeverse. The result of this battle would be a huge loss for Ohio. Now this fight would be one of the most ridiculous in the memeverse, causing such insane amounts of disarray. And victorious, the spinning skull was in the hands of the Giga Clan. But those powerful shockwaves would attract other powerful memeverse characters from around the world. And that concludes the Sigma vs Ohio arc of the memeverse. Let me know if you enjoyed the video and would like to see more. Make sure to follow my other social medias, both at Hyperstrides on Instagram and TikTok. I cover and break down all sorts of funny memes and brain rot. Thank you guys so much for watching. You're the best, and see ya.